All right, today we are diving deep into one of Italy's most chilling and, frankly, most complex unsolved cases ever, the hunt for the serial killer known only as the Monster of Florence. So picture this, for 17 long years, from 1968 all the way to 1985, the beautiful picturesque hills around Florence became a hunting ground. A complete shadow of a person brought this reign of terror to the region, and it created a climate of fear that honestly changed the way an entire generation lived their lives.
And the killer's targets? Well, they were terrifyingly specific. He went exclusively after young lovers, people parked in cars in these secluded wooded spots. This earned him the pretty grim nickname, the Maniac of Couples.
His method was just consistent and brutal. Every single attack involved the same handgun, a .22 caliber Beretta, and was followed by these horrific mutilations done with a knife. This grim signature would be the only real thread connecting these crimes for years.
But here's the thing. Despite decades of investigations, multiple arrests, these really controversial trials, a single haunting question is still hanging in the air. Who was the Monster of Florence?
So to even begin to understand this whole mystery, you have to understand the pattern. And this killer's pattern was just terrifyingly consistent for almost 2 decades.
The murders happened over 8 separate times, but just look at this timeline. You see these long, eerie gaps? 6 years between the first and second attacks, and then another 7 years before the spree really kicks off in the 80s. These quiet periods are a huge part of what made him so scary. He could just melt back into society, leaving investigators with absolutely nothing but silence.
And when you dig into the details, it reveals this almost ritualistic obsession. The victims? Always young couples. The timing? Always near the new moon. The weapon was always the same gun, firing the exact same type of Winchester bullets, all marked with a little H. And, of course, the most chilling part, the gruesome surgical excisions performed on the female victims. This wasn't just murder. It felt like some kind of macabre ritual.
So the final tally? It's just staggering. 8 double murders, 16 lives taken. It's a legacy of terror that really haunts the region to this day.
Okay, so you have this really clear pattern, right? So how did the investigation even start? Well, for more than a decade, it started by going down a completely wrong path.
You see, that first murder back in 1968 was treated like a simple crime of passion. The victim's husband, a man named Stefano Mele, actually confessed and was sent to jail. So this led the police to get completely fixated on this tangled web of his Sardinian relatives and the victim's lovers, a theory that became known as the Sardinian Trail.
But this trail, it was a complete and total dead end. The real monster kept killing even when the key suspects, including Mele himself, were already behind bars. Every new murder basically served as a perfect alibi for the very men the police were chasing, proving the real killer was still out there.
That focus on the Sardinian Trail cost the investigation precious years. This was an era before DNA databases, before modern forensics. The police were literally chasing ghosts, and all the while, the monster's reign of terror just continued completely unchecked.
All right, so now let's get into the most famous phase of this whole investigation. You'll see how this all builds toward a trial that satisfied, well, almost no one.
So in the early 90s, after years of nothing but dead ends, a computer analysis and some anonymous tips finally pointed investigators toward a new suspect, Pietro Pacciani. Now this guy was a farmer with a known history of violence, including a murder conviction from way back in 1951.
Pretty soon, the case expands to include Pacciani's friends, Mario Vanni and Giancarlo Lotti. During the trial, when Vanni was asked about his relationship with Pacciani, he gives this now infamous reply claiming they were just snack buddies. And that name stuck, forever branding them in the Italian press. But the legal results from the trial were just a complete mess. Pacciani was convicted, then he was acquitted on appeal, and then he died before a new trial could even happen. Vanni and Lotti were ultimately convicted, but their cases were just riddled with doubt and built on really shaky ground.
So here is the crucial point. You have to get this. The entire case against these men didn't rest on DNA or fingerprints or finding a murder weapon. No, it rested almost entirely on the bizarre, contradictory, constantly changing stories of Giancarlo Lotti, a man who started as a witness before somehow incriminating himself.
And this brings us to the central paradox of the Monster of Florence case. right? If men were sent to prison for these crimes, why does pretty much everyone in Italy, from journalists to investigators, still consider this mystery completely unsolved?
Well, the answer isn't in what the investigation found. It's in everything it failed to find.
The murder weapon, that signature .22 Beretta, never found. No physical evidence, not a drop of DNA, not a single fingerprint ever placed the snack buddies at any of the 8 crime scenes. The gruesome trophies taken from the victims vanished into thin air. There was even a taunting letter sent to a prosecutor that contained a piece of a victim's flesh, and it yielded 0 clues. Without that crucial evidence, the convictions just felt hollow.
So this vacuum of evidence, it just opened the door to much darker, way more elaborate theories. Some investigators started to believe the snack buddies weren't the masterminds at all, but just low-level thugs acting on orders from a so-called second level, maybe a satanic cult or a secret society of wealthy, powerful people who commission the murders for their own twisted rituals.
But, and this is important to remember, while those theories are incredibly sensational, decades of more investigation have failed to produce a single piece of objective proof to support them. They just remain speculation, part of the swirling mythology of the whole case.
So, after all of this, what should you really take away from this labyrinth of a case? What is the ultimate legacy of the Monster of Florence?
In the end, the case is just this haunting story of terror. It's a masterclass in investigative failure, and it's a chilling mystery that feels like it might be sealed forever in those Tuscan hills. The main players are all gone, the key evidence is missing, and it leaves all of us wondering, will the true face of the Monster of Florence ever actually be known?